Your soulmate is begging you to hear this, the secret message you need before you meet. There are moments in life when nothing on the outside looks different, yet something inside you feels quietly alert. Not anxious. Not excited. Just aware. As if a chapter is preparing to turn, even though the page hasn't moved yet. If you've been feeling that lately, it's not random. It's not imagination. And it's not something you need to dismiss. Before soulmates meet, there is often a pause like this. A space where life slows just enough for something important to be understood. Not learned. Understood. Because if this understanding doesn't happen now, the meeting can still happen, but it won't land the way it's meant to. Your soulmate isn't begging you in a dramatic way. They're not desperate. They're not reaching from fear or loneliness. What's happening is quieter than that. It's the kind of urgency that comes from knowing timing matters. From knowing that love, when it arrives at the wrong emotional angle, can be misunderstood or even pushed away. They don't want that to happen. There is something they need you to hear before you meet them, and it has nothing to do with changing who you are. It has everything to do with releasing what no longer belongs in the version of you that's about to be seen. Right now, you're carrying experiences that shaped you. That's normal. Everyone does. But some of what you're carrying isn't wisdom anymore, it's residue. Emotional habits you picked up when you had to protect yourself. Patterns you learned when clarity wasn't offered. Guardrails you built when love felt unpredictable. Those things helped you survive earlier chapters. They don't belong in the next one. Your soulmate doesn't want to meet the version of you that learned to brace for disappointment. They don't want to meet the version of you that waits for the other shoe to drop. They don't want to meet the version of you that stays half present, half prepared to leave. Not because those versions are wrong or weak, but because those versions would misinterpret what's coming. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. When you've lived through emotional inconsistency, stability can feel unfamiliar. Calm can feel empty. Safety can feel anticlimactic. And without realizing it, you might overlook the very thing you asked the universe for. Simply because it doesn't activate the old survival responses you're used to. Your soulmate is asking you not to mistake peace for a lack of chemistry. They are not coming to shake your world apart. They are coming to meet you in it. Fully. Honestly. Without games, confusion, or emotional distance. But if part of you is still wired to associate intensity with connection, you may miss the depth in front of you. This is why the message matters now. There is also something else they need you to understand, and this part is important. You do not need to be fully healed to meet them. You do not need to have everything figured out. You do not need to be fearless, perfectly secure, or emotionally flawless. What you do need is honesty. Honesty with yourself about what you need. Honesty about what you can give. Honesty about what you will no longer tolerate, even if it once felt normal. Your soulmate doesn't want a polished version of you. They want a present one. A version of you that can say when something feels off instead of internalizing it. A version of you that can receive care without deflecting it. A version of you that doesn't test people to see if they'll stay. There is a quiet habit you may not even realize you've developed, rehearsing endings. Imagining how things might fall apart. Keeping emotional distance, just in case. Telling yourself it's realism, when it's really self-protection. Your soulmate feels this energy long before words are exchanged. They are not threatened by your independence. They respect your boundaries. What they are afraid of is meeting you while you are still guarding against something that isn't trying to hurt you. They want you to arrive fully. Not attached to outcomes. Not rushing into certainty. Just present. Presence is the one thing that allows real connection to unfold naturally. There is also a deep reassurance in this message, and it's one you may need to hear more than you realize. You are not late. You are not behind. You did not miss your chance at real love. Every delay, every ending, every almost relationship was shaping your capacity, not punishing you. You needed to learn discernment. You needed to learn self-trust. You needed to learn how to walk away without closing your heart. Your soulmate needed to learn their own lessons too. That's why this meeting is happening now and not earlier. Not because love wasn't possible before, but because it wouldn't have been sustainable. One or both of you would have repeated patterns you've now outgrown. Right now, you are more aware. More grounded. Less willing to abandon yourself. And that readiness matters more than timing ever did. Your soulmate is asking you to trust that readiness. Stop asking if you're ready enough. Stop waiting for perfect certainty. Stop postponing openness until fear disappears. Fearlessness isn't required for real love. Presence is. There is one final thing they need you to hear before you meet, and this part may feel subtle, but it changes everything. Do not rush to define the connection when it arrives. Let it breathe. Let it show you what it is through consistency, not intensity. Let it unfold without forcing meaning onto it. The love that lasts doesn't need to be grabbed quickly. It stays on its own. If you move too fast out of excitement, you may miss how safe it actually feels. If you hold back too much out of fear, you may never let it begin. Balance is what they're asking for. Your soulmate isn't coming to save you. And they're not asking to be saved. They're coming to meet you where you are, as you are, without the weight of old stories clouding the present moment. This message is not about predicting the future. It's about preparing the ground. Because when two people finally meet at the right emotional depth, something rare happens. There is no chase. No confusion. No guessing. Just recognition, calm, steady, and unmistakable. That is what's being protected right now. In the next part, you'll understand what this meeting will feel like, why it may arrive quietly instead of dramatically, and how to recognize it without overthinking or missing the signs. For now, let this settle. You're not being asked to change who you are. You're being asked to arrive without carrying what no longer belongs. And that choice will shape everything that comes next. After you hear that message, something subtle begins to rearrange inside you. Not all at once. Not in a way that's obvious to anyone else. It happens quietly, in the background of your everyday life. You still wake up, go about your routine, handle responsibilities. But underneath it all, your inner posture changes. You stop leaning forward emotionally. For a long time, leaning forward felt normal. You leaned into conversations, into potential, into possibilities. You leaned into people who weren't fully there yet. You leaned into waiting, hoping, adjusting. It didn't always feel like sacrifice at the time. It felt like effort. Like patience. Like love. But now, something shifts. You begin standing where you are instead of reaching ahead. This is important, because your soulmate cannot meet you if you are always emotionally ahead of the moment. They can only meet you where you are grounded. And that grounding is happening now. You may notice that you're less reactive than before. Things that once triggered overthinking don't grip you the same way. Silence doesn't automatically mean danger. Delays don't immediately translate into rejection. You're not numbing yourself or shutting down. You're just not chasing emotional certainty anymore. That's not detachment. That's regulation. Your soulmate feels this shift even before they meet you. Not consciously, not logically, but in the way aligned people sense readiness. The energy between two people starts organizing itself differently when both are no longer operating from lack. This is one of the biggest secrets people don't talk about. Soulmate connections don't activate when both people are longing. They activate when both people are available. Availability doesn't mean eager. It means present without defense. Right now, you're becoming emotionally available in a new way. Not by opening your heart wider, but by cleaning out what doesn't belong there anymore. Old expectations. Old fears. Old habits of bracing for disappointment. This is why things may feel quieter than you expected. You might have thought that preparing for a soulmate would feel exciting, electric, full of signs and synchronicities. Instead, it feels grounding. Ordinary. Almost understated. That's because your nervous system is finally learning that safety doesn't need drama to announce itself. Your soulmate needs you to recognize this calm, not question it. Because when you meet them, the connection won't hijack you. It won't destabilize your sense of self. It won't make you forget who you are. It will fit into your life without demanding that you abandon yourself to make room for it. That's how you'll know it's real. But here's the part that requires honesty. There may be moments where this calm feels unfamiliar enough that your mind tries to create intensity. You might catch yourself wondering if something is missing. If the spark is strong enough. If you should feel more. This is where your past conditioning may try to speak. In the past, chemistry was tied to uncertainty. Attraction was tied to inconsistency. Desire was tied to emotional distance. Your body learned to associate longing with love because longing kept you alert, engaged, and hopeful. But longing is not connection. It's anticipation without grounding. Your soulmate is asking you to notice the difference this time. To stay present long enough to let something deeper form. Because depth doesn't rush. It builds. And if you move too quickly trying to label or define what's happening, you may miss the steady unfolding that makes this connection different. Another truth begins to surface in this phase. You are no longer interested in potential. You're interested in reality. This doesn't make you less romantic. It makes you more discerning. You've already lived the chapter where you believed in what someone could become. You know now how exhausting that can be when growth isn't mutual. Your soulmate is not coming to be inspired by you. They are coming already willing. Willing to communicate. Willing to be consistent. Willing to show up without being chased. That willingness is what you're aligning with now. You may notice that you're less tolerant of ambiguity. Not because you need control, but because you value clarity. You don't want to guess how someone feels. You don't want to decode behavior. You don't want to interpret silence. And the beautiful thing is, with the right person, you won't have to. That's another reason this message had to arrive before the meeting. If you were still operating from your old patterns, you might try to manage the connection instead of experiencing it. You might overgive, over-explain, over-adjust. All in the name of keeping something that doesn't require that effort. Your soulmate doesn't want that dynamic. They want mutuality. They want a connection where both people feel chosen without effort. Where presence is offered freely, not negotiated. Where communication feels natural instead of strategic. That kind of connection can only happen when you stop performing emotional labor for love. You're doing that now. There's also something else happening beneath the surface that you may not fully recognize yet. Your sense of timing has changed. You're no longer measuring your life against a clock. You're no longer asking whether you're behind or ahead. You're no longer comparing your path to anyone else's. That internal pressure has softened. And that matters, because soulmate connections don't thrive under urgency. They thrive under alignment. When both people feel free to choose instead of pressured to catch up. Your soulmate feels this freedom in you. It's part of what draws them in. Not because you're distant, but because you're self-contained. You're no longer asking love to validate your worth. You're inviting love to share your life. That shift changes everything. Now, let's talk about fear. Fear doesn't disappear before soulmate meetings. It just changes form. Instead of fearing abandonment, you may fear vulnerability. Instead of fearing rejection, you may fear disruption. Fear doesn't mean something is wrong. It means something meaningful is approaching. The difference now is that fear no longer controls your behavior. You don't shut down because of it. You don't rush because of it. You acknowledge it without letting it drive. That's maturity. Your soulmate doesn't need you fearless. They need you honest. Honest about your pace. Honest about your needs. Honest about your boundaries. They are not looking for perfection. They are looking for presence. Presence shows up in how you listen. In how you respond instead of react. In how you allow connection without gripping it. This is the energy you're stepping into now. And because of that, the meeting itself will feel different than anything you've experienced before. It won't feel like fate crashing into your life. It will feel like recognition settling into place. You won't feel lost in it. You'll feel found. That doesn't mean everything will be instantly clear. It means everything will feel grounded enough to explore without fear. There will be curiosity without anxiety. Attraction without instability. Interest without pressure. That balance is rare. And it's the result of everything you've already done. This part of the journey is not asking you to do more. It's asking you to trust what has already changed inside you. To let go of the idea that love must be dramatic to be meaningful. To allow something steady to enter without questioning its legitimacy. Your soulmate is not begging for your attention. They're asking for your availability. Availability to meet them as you are now, not as who you used to be. Availability to receive love without preparing for loss. Availability to stay present instead of jumping ahead or pulling back. That's the secret message. Not a warning. Not a promise. An invitation. In the next part, we'll talk about what the actual meeting feels like emotionally, why it may surprise you in its simplicity, and how to recognize it without sabotaging it through old expectations. For now, just notice this. You are calmer than you used to be. Clearer than you used to be. Less afraid of love than you think. And that is exactly why this meeting is finally possible. When the meeting finally gets close, something inside you becomes very quiet. Not numb. Not detached. Quiet in a way that feels intentional, like your system is conserving energy instead of spending it on anticipation. You're not imagining conversations anymore. You're not scripting outcomes. You're not trying to decide what this will become before it even has a chance to exist. That alone is one of the clearest signs that you're approaching this differently than anything before. In the past, closeness may have activated urgency. You wanted to understand quickly, define quickly, secure quickly. You mistook speed for depth because speed felt like safety when you were afraid of loss. Now, something else is happening. You're allowing the moment to arrive without grabbing it. You're letting curiosity exist without attaching it to outcome. You're letting interest unfold without interrogating it. That shift is not accidental. It's the result of everything you've already lived through. As the meeting approaches, you may notice that you're more attuned to yourself than to them. You're noticing your body. Your breathing. Your internal signals. You're aware of how you feel in your own presence. That's new. Before, your awareness might have been outward focused, constantly checking how you were being perceived, how the other person was responding, whether things were moving in the right direction. Now, your center is inside you. This changes the entire dynamic before a single word is spoken. Your soulmate doesn't meet you as someone hoping to be chosen. They meet you as someone already anchored in themselves. That anchoring creates a different kind of magnetism. Not the kind that pulls through intensity, but the kind that holds through steadiness. You may not feel a rush at first. And that may surprise you. There might be attraction, warmth, familiarity, ease. But it doesn't feel overwhelming. It feels natural. Almost simple. And for a brief moment, your mind might question that simplicity. It might ask whether this is enough, whether something dramatic should be happening, whether this is how it's supposed to feel. This is where your growth matters. Because what you're feeling is not lack. It's alignment. Alignment doesn't spike your nervous system. It calms it. Alignment doesn't create chaos. It creates recognition. You don't feel like you're chasing a feeling. You feel like you're settling into one. Conversation flows, not because you're trying, but because you're not trying. You don't feel the need to impress or perform. You're not scanning for approval. You're simply present. And presence allows authenticity to surface naturally. You speak more honestly than you used to. Not dramatically, not with intensity, but plainly. You don't overshare to create closeness. You let closeness develop on its own. You don't hide parts of yourself, but you don't rush to reveal everything either. This balance is something you didn't have before. Your soulmate feels it too. They don't feel pressure to lead or control the interaction. They don't feel the need to dominate the emotional space or fill every silence. There's room to breathe. Room to pause. Room to be human. And that room is where trust begins. You may notice that you're listening differently now. You're not listening for reassurance. You're listening for truth. You're paying attention to how they speak about their life, their values, their past. Not with suspicion, but with discernment. You're noticing whether their words and energy align, whether their presence feels grounded or scattered, whether their attention feels intentional or performative. This doesn't make you guarded. It makes you conscious. Conscious people don't rush into attachment. They let connection reveal itself. And that's exactly what's happening here. There's another subtle difference you may notice. You don't feel the urge to fix anything. In past connections, you might have instinctively filled emotional gaps, soothed discomfort, or tried to make things easier for the other person. Now, you allow discomfort to exist without rushing to resolve it. You trust that if something is real, it can hold a little uncertainty without collapsing. This trust is new. And it's powerful. As time passes after the meeting, you don't replay it obsessively. You don't analyze every detail. You don't question whether you said the right thing or showed up the right way. You feel settled. Curious, yes. Interested, yes. But not consumed. That's how you know this is different. Because real connection doesn't hijack your life. It integrates into it. Your days continue. Your routines remain intact. Your sense of self doesn't blur. And yet, there's a gentle sense of continuity, like something has clicked into place without disrupting anything else. You may also notice that you're less tolerant of mixed signals now. Not because you're demanding, but because ambiguity no longer feels romantic. It feels unnecessary. And the beautiful thing is, with this connection, you're not asked to tolerate it. Communication feels straightforward. Interest feels consistent. You're not guessing where you stand. That clarity doesn't come from declarations. It comes from behavior. You don't feel pulled into emotional highs and lows. You feel steady. And steadiness allows intimacy to deepen without fear. You can share parts of yourself without worrying about how they'll be used. You can express needs without rehearsing them. You can say no without bracing for consequences. This sense of emotional safety is not accidental. It's the result of two people meeting at the same level of readiness. You may find yourself reflecting on past connections and realizing how much energy you spent managing uncertainty. How much of your emotional life revolved around waiting, hoping, interpreting. That contrast becomes very clear now. And instead of sadness, you feel relief. Relief that you no longer live that way. Relief that you don't have to work for connection anymore. Relief that being yourself is enough. There's also a moment, often quiet and internal, when you realize that you're not afraid of where this could go. Not because you're guaranteed an outcome, but because you trust yourself to handle whatever unfolds. You know that you won't lose yourself again. You know that you won't stay where alignment fades. You know that you can choose with clarity instead of fear. That confidence doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from experience. You've already survived disappointment. You've already rebuilt yourself. You've already learned how to walk away with dignity. That knowledge lives in you now, not as armor, but as wisdom. And because of that, you can stay open without being reckless. This is the point where many people sabotage real connection without realizing it. They try to recreate intensity. They test the bond. They rush for labels. They mistake calm for boredom and consistency for predictability. You don't do that anymore. You allow things to unfold at a pace that feels natural to your body, not dictated by fear or fantasy. You let curiosity guide you instead of anxiety. You stay present instead of projecting ahead. Your soulmate recognizes this immediately. They feel seen, not scrutinized. Chosen, not evaluated. And that allows them to show up fully as well. Without defensiveness. Without performance. This mutual ease creates something rare. A connection that doesn't need to prove itself. As days turn into weeks, the bond deepens not through intensity, but through repetition. Shared moments. Follow through. Presence. You start to trust not because you're convinced, but because nothing feels misaligned. And if something does feel off, you notice it quickly. You don't ignore it. You don't minimize it. You don't explain it away. You acknowledge it calmly and address it directly. That honesty strengthens the connection instead of threatening it. This is what emotional maturity looks like in real time. Not perfection. Not certainty. But responsiveness. You're no longer trying to be chosen. You're choosing to. And that mutual choosing is what makes this meeting meaningful beyond attraction or timing. It's not about fate bringing two people together. It's about two people being ready to meet each other without distortion. By the time you realize how deeply this is affecting you, it's already woven into your life in a way that feels stable. Not consuming. Not overwhelming. Stable. You don't lose sleep over it. You sleep better. You don't feel anxious about the future. You feel curious about it. You don't feel the need to tell everyone. You feel grounded enough to let it be yours. This is the secret most people never hear. Soulmate connections don't feel like storms. They feel like arrival. Quiet. Clear. Steady. And the reason this one changes everything is not because of what happens next, but because of who you are when it happens. You're no longer meeting love from wounds. You're meeting it from wholeness. And that changes the story completely. As time continues after the meeting, you start to realize that what's unfolding doesn't demand constant attention to survive. It doesn't pull you away from yourself. It doesn't ask you to rearrange your life just to make space for it. Instead, it begins to settle into your world in a way that feels natural, almost understated. That's when you understand that this connection isn't here to interrupt your life. It's here to walk alongside it. You notice that you're not waiting for the next message with your breath held. You're not checking your phone with nervous anticipation. When communication happens, it feels intentional, not urgent. When there's space, it feels calm, not threatening. This is a new experience for you, even if you don't immediately label it as such. Before, space used to mean distance. Silence used to mean withdrawal. Now, space simply means two people living their lives while staying connected. Silence doesn't trigger stories in your head. It doesn't send you spiraling into self-doubt. It's just silence. That alone tells you how much has changed inside you. You also start to notice how this connection affects your daily emotional state. You're more even. More balanced. Not emotionally high one day and low the next. Your mood doesn't depend on how things are going between you. That's not because you care less. It's because you care without attaching your stability to someone else's behavior. This kind of emotional independence doesn't weaken intimacy. It strengthens it. You feel more comfortable expressing yourself honestly. Not because you're trying to secure anything, but because honesty feels safe now. You don't soften your words to avoid rocking the boat. You don't hold things in until they turn into resentment. You say what you feel when you feel it, calmly, without charge. And what surprises you is how well that honesty is received. There's no defensiveness. No shutting down. No turning the conversation back on you. Instead, there's listening. Consideration. Thoughtfulness. Even when there are differences, they're handled with respect instead of avoidance. You begin to understand something important here. Compatibility isn't about agreeing on everything. It's about being able to move through disagreement without losing connection. And this connection holds. Another subtle shift happens in how you view yourself within this dynamic. You don't feel smaller. You don't feel like you're bending to fit. You don't feel like you're auditioning for a role. You feel like you belong as you are. That sense of belonging is quiet but profound. It shows up when you talk about your past without feeling exposed. It shows up when you share fears without worrying they'll be used against you. It shows up when you talk about your future and don't feel the need to compromise your dreams just to stay aligned. You're not shrinking. You're expanding. And the expansion feels mutual. You also notice how grounded your thoughts about the future have become. You're not fantasizing about dramatic milestones. You're not obsessing over what this will become. You're imagining shared realities. Conversations. Decisions. Growth. You're imagining partnership, not escape. That's a major shift from the past. In earlier connections, you may have used the future as a way to cope with the present. You imagined where things could go to make sense of where they were. Now, the present stands on its own. It doesn't need to be justified by promises or potential. The present feels enough. You may find yourself reflecting on old versions of love and realizing how much emotional labor you carried. How often you anticipated needs before they were spoken. How often you adapted without being asked. How often you made yourself smaller to keep peace. You're not doing that here. And the most important part is that you don't feel guilty for it. You trust that if something needs to be said, it will be said. If something needs to be addressed, it can be addressed. You don't feel responsible for managing the entire emotional landscape of the connection. That responsibility is shared. There's also a sense of patience that exists now, but it's not the patience of waiting. It's the patience of confidence. You're not holding your breath for clarity. You already feel clear. You're allowing things to deepen at a pace that feels respectful to both of you. And because there's no rush, trust grows organically. Trust doesn't come from big gestures here. It comes from consistency. From showing up when it's easy and when it's not. From remembering details. From following through. From being emotionally available even on ordinary days. Those ordinary days start to matter more than anything else. You notice how comfortable you feel being quiet together. How there's no pressure to fill every moment with conversation or affection. Presence is enough. That comfort isn't boring. It's grounding. It tells your body that you're safe. This safety allows you to be playful again. Light. Curious. You laugh more freely. You're less guarded with joy. You don't hold back happiness out of fear that it will be taken away. You're learning to receive without bracing. That's a big step. As this continues, you also become aware of your own discernment. You're not blindly idealizing the connection. You're paying attention. You're noticing how challenges are handled. How stress is managed. How differences are respected. And what you're seeing aligns with what you need. That doesn't mean everything is perfect. It means it's workable. It means when something feels off, it doesn't stay off. It's addressed. It's repaired. It doesn't linger as unspoken tension. Repair is one of the strongest indicators of long-term compatibility. You didn't always know that. Before, you might have mistaken chemistry for connection. You might have mistaken longing for depth. You might have mistaken intensity for intimacy. Now, you can feel the difference in your body. Your body is calm here. Not numb. Calm. That calm allows you to think clearly. To choose intentionally. To stay grounded in your values. You're no longer acting from fear of loss. You're acting from alignment. And alignment feels steady. As you sit in this phase, you may realize that the secret message you were asked to hear before the meeting has done its work. You didn't force yourself to change. You didn't perform healing. You simply allowed yourself to arrive without dragging the past into the present. That choice created space. Space for recognition. Space for safety. Space for something real to grow. You're no longer wondering whether this is meaningful. You feel it in how natural it is. In how little effort it takes to be yourself. In how supported you feel without being controlled. This part of the journey isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's the kind of quiet that comes from alignment finally settling into place. And as you move forward, you're not asking whether love will last. You're asking whether it feels right to keep choosing it. So far, the answer comes without strain. That's how you know you're exactly where you're meant to be. Over time, something becomes very clear to you, even if you never say it out loud. You are no longer trying to figure out where you stand. You are no longer measuring moments, replaying conversations, or looking for reassurance hidden between the lines. The relationship is no longer something you analyze. It's something you experience. And that shift, more than anything else, tells you how different this chapter is from all the ones before. You notice it in how relaxed your mind feels. Your thoughts aren't circling the same questions anymore. You're not asking yourself whether you're doing enough, being enough, or saying the right things. You show up as you are, and that feels sufficient. Not tolerated. Not accommodated. Sufficient. There is a quiet confidence growing inside you, and it doesn't come from certainty about the future. It comes from trust in yourself. You trust your perceptions. You trust your boundaries. You trust your ability to speak up and your ability to walk away if something no longer aligns. That trust creates a sense of inner safety that you didn't have before, and it changes how you relate to love entirely. You also start to recognize how little effort it takes to maintain connection now. Not because anyone is trying less, but because effort is shared. Communication doesn't feel like a task. It feels like a natural extension of presence. You don't have to remind them of your importance. You don't have to ask to be considered. You are included without negotiation. This brings a kind of peace that is hard to describe unless you've lived without it. In the past, love may have felt like something you had to protect constantly. You guarded it, adjusted for it, worked around it. You stayed alert, always prepared to respond to changes in tone or energy. Now, love feels stable enough to lean into without fear of collapse. You don't feel like you're holding something fragile. You feel like you're building something solid. And because of that, you become more yourself. You speak more freely. You laugh without checking how it lands. You share opinions without softening them to be more acceptable. You allow your full personality to exist in the space without worrying that it might be too much or not enough. That freedom is not dramatic, but it is life-changing. You also notice that your emotional reactions have softened. Not dulled, but balanced. When something bothers you, you don't internalize it or let it grow quietly. You bring it into the open, calmly. And when you do, it's met with care rather than defensiveness. That response teaches your nervous system something new. Conflict does not have to lead to disconnection. That lesson alone rewires how you love. You begin to understand that love is not about never being triggered. It's about feeling safe enough to address what comes up without fear of abandonment or punishment. And in this connection, that safety exists. You don't have to choose between honesty and harmony. Both can exist together. As this continues, you may feel a sense of gratitude for everything that didn't work out before. Not because it didn't hurt, and not because it was easy, but because it shaped your discernment. You can see now how different this feels from relationships that required you to overextend or overfunction. You can see how those experiences taught you what you need in order to thrive, not just survive. You're no longer confusing attachment with intimacy. Intimacy now feels like being seen and staying seen. Like being understood without explanation. Like being able to rest emotionally instead of constantly adjusting. That kind of intimacy doesn't rush. It deepens slowly, through shared experiences and consistent presence. You also notice how grounded your expectations have become. You're not projecting perfection onto the future. You're not imagining a life without challenges. You understand that real partnership includes stress, differences, and growth. But you also understand that you don't have to face those things alone anymore. There is comfort in that realization. Comfort that doesn't feel like complacency. Comfort that feels like support. You may find yourself thinking less about labels and more about alignment. Less about what this is called and more about how it feels to live inside it. And how it feels is steady. Clear. Respectful. Alive. This steadiness allows love to expand instead of tighten. You don't feel boxed in or defined by the relationship. You feel supported by it. Encouraged. Seen. Your individuality doesn't disappear. It's welcomed. That is something you didn't always believe was possible. You're also aware now that you're choosing this connection consciously, not emotionally. Not because you're swept away, but because it aligns with your values. That conscious choice feels empowering. It means you're here because you want to be, not because you're afraid of being alone. That distinction gives the relationship a very different foundation. You also notice how calm your body feels when you imagine continuing forward. There's no tightening in your chest. No knot in your stomach. No sense of bracing. Just openness. Curiosity. A grounded sense of possibility. Your body recognizes safety before your mind does. And it recognizes it here. As this phase unfolds, you may realize that the secret message you were meant to hear before meeting your soulmate wasn't about them at all. It was about you. About releasing old patterns. About trusting calm. About allowing love to arrive without resistance or self-sabotage. You didn't need to do anything dramatic to prepare. You just needed to stop carrying what no longer belonged to you. And you did. Now, you are not chasing the future. You're living in the present with clarity. You're not afraid to love deeply because you know you won't lose yourself in the process. You're not afraid to choose because you know you can choose again if something changes. That confidence is quiet, but it's unshakable. This part of the journey doesn't come with fireworks or declarations. It comes with a sense of rightness that settles in slowly and stays. It comes with emotional ease. With mutual respect. With shared presence. And you realize, almost without thinking about it, that this is what you were hoping for all along. Not intensity. Not chaos. Not longing. But connection that feels like home. And now that you know what that feels like, you know you will never accept less again. As everything settles into place, you begin to understand that this part of the journey was never about reaching a dramatic conclusion. It was about arriving at a truth you can live inside. By now, you're not asking yourself whether this connection is real. You're asking something quieter, something more meaningful. You're asking whether this is the kind of love you can grow old inside of without losing yourself. That question doesn't come from fear. It comes from wisdom. You've lived enough life to know that love is not sustained by excitement alone. It's sustained by how two people treat each other when life becomes ordinary, heavy, repetitive, or uncertain. And what you're noticing now is that the ordinary moments feel surprisingly rich. Not because something extraordinary is happening, but because nothing feels misaligned. You wake up and go about your day without emotional static in the background. Your mind is not preoccupied with unanswered questions. Your heart is not bracing for disappointment. You're simply living, and this connection exists within your life instead of hovering over it. That's when it becomes clear. This is no longer about anticipation. It's about integration. You see how naturally this person fits into your rhythm. Not perfectly, not without adjustment, but without resistance. You don't feel like you're constantly negotiating space or identity. You don't feel like you have to explain yourself in order to be understood. When you speak, you're heard. When you pause, that pause is respected. Respect is something you used to underestimate. Before, You might have confused emotional intensity with care. You might have mistaken inconsistency for mystery. You might have believed that love required effort to the point of exhaustion. Now, you know better. You know that real love feels cooperative. It feels like two people moving in the same direction, even when they don't walk at the same pace. You notice how decisions are made now. Not unilaterally. Not defensively. But together. There is consideration, not control. Curiosity, not assumption. Even when opinions differ, the tone remains grounded. You don't feel overridden. You don't feel dismissed. You feel included. That sense of inclusion does something powerful. It allows you to relax fully into yourself. You stop scanning for problems. You stop preparing for emotional shifts. You stop wondering when the ground might move beneath your feet. Your nervous system learns a new baseline. And from that baseline, you become more generous, more playful, more open. Not because you're trying to maintain the connection, but because you finally feel safe enough to be expressive. You don't withhold affection out of self-protection. You don't ration vulnerability. You give freely, knowing you are not giving alone. This mutual exchange is what makes everything sustainable. You also notice that you no longer feel pulled toward old patterns. The people who once would have caught your attention no longer do. The dynamics that once felt familiar now feel draining. You're not judging them. You're simply no longer compatible with them. Growth changes attraction. What you're drawn to now is presence. Emotional availability. Consistency. Integrity. These qualities may not shout, but they last. And because they last, they create a sense of future that doesn't feel imagined. It feels possible. When you think about moving forward, you don't feel pressure. You feel readiness. Not urgency, not fear of missing out. Readiness that comes from alignment. Readiness that comes from knowing you're not choosing out of loneliness or hope, but out of clarity. That clarity extends inward too. You are no longer unsure of your own needs. You don't second-guess your boundaries. You don't feel guilty for asking for what matters to you. You've learned that the right connection doesn't make you feel demanding for wanting emotional honesty, time, or care. The right connection makes those things feel normal. You also recognize how far you've come emotionally. You remember the version of yourself who used to wait for replies with a tight chest. Who used to replay conversations looking for hidden meaning. Who used to settle for partial presence because it felt better than absence. You don't live that way anymore. Not because you hardened, but because you healed. Healing didn't make you less sensitive. It made you less afraid of your sensitivity. You no longer see your depth as something that needs to be managed. You see it as something that needs to be matched. And now, it is. There is a quiet confidence in knowing that if this relationship continues, it will do so because it's nurtured, not forced. And if it ever needed to change, you would have the strength and clarity to respond without losing yourself. That knowledge removes desperation from love. You're not holding on tightly. You're holding wisely. As you move deeper into this chapter, you may realize that the secret message you were meant to hear before meeting your soulmate was never a warning or a prediction. It was preparation. Preparation to recognize something healthy when it arrived. Preparation to not sabotage calm with old fears. Preparation to trust what feels steady instead of chasing what feels familiar. You listened. And because you listened, you didn't miss this.
This love story doesn't change your life by sweeping you away. It changes your life by anchoring you, by giving you place to stand where love doesn't cost you your peace, where connection doesn't require self abandonment, where commitment feels like a shared direction instead of a sacrifice. You don't need to announce this chapter to the world. You don't need to rush to define it. You don't to need external validation. What matters is how it feels inside you, and inside it feels calm, clear, alive. You are no longer chasing love, you are participating in it. That's the difference. And as this story continues beyond these words, you carry something individual with you, the knowledge that you can love deeply without losing yourself, the trust that calm is not emptiness, the understanding that when love is right, it doesn't beg to be believed, it simply shows up and stays. This is where the story rests for now, not because it's over, but because it's no longer needs explaining. Thanks for watching. Like this video and subscribe to this channel.